This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with Italian football coach Fabrizio Piccareta. He discusses his journey into coaching and working for such clubs as Inter Milan, Sampdoria, and Roma, his time as the assistant manager to Paolo Di Canio, both at Swindon and Sunderland, and some of the challenges he faced during these roles, as well as him experience a variety of cultures around the world and how this informed his working practices. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, please make sure you share it with friends and family. I hope you enjoy. Perfect. So, Fabrizio, I know we caught up a little bit there, but how are things in Italy? Are you all good and well?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks. Yeah, very well. Summer is coming, so perfect timing.
Perfect. So, for people that maybe don't know you, haven't come across you before, or just don't know your story, do you want to just give us a little bit of an oversight of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. Of course, my name is Fabrizio Piccareta. I'm 58 years old. I was born in Genoa, Italy. Grown up with football, as probably all the children in Italy at the time, with nothing else than a ball to play on the streets, and that was my background in terms of passion for the game. I started my playing career in my hometown with Sampdoria, and I was there since I was 7, and then I left Sampdoria when I was 18. So basically, my entire young first part of my life has been spent with that club. I was lucky enough to become the skipper, the captain of the under-19 team, who was the coach. The coach at the time was Marcello Lippi, and I think he doesn't need to explain more rather than mention his name. I can say that I was the first captain of his coaching career. So somehow I think I brought some luck to him for his success. But joking aside, I was considered a talented footballer at the time. That of course there were times where there were no agents, there were nobody who could look after your career, give some advices, and then I made probably some wrong choices in my playing career, and I ended up playing in the lower leagues in Italy, which wasn't the best. Probably I was expecting something more from my playing career, so my dream was to become a footballer, and I didn't make it. But I'm not gonna blame anyone else rather than me, because I think, and this is something I keep telling my young players, nobody will help you to cross the bridge. So the people, coaches especially, will build a bridge for you, but you are the one who have to cross this bridge and get to the other side. And if you don't do it, probably nobody will take you there. So when of course my passion for the game has been great for my whole life. But as I said, I never become a professional player, and I spent my adult life doing other jobs. The main one was a bookseller. I had my bookshop for 13 years almost, and that was my other great passion. So football and books are my two big passions. And of course, meanwhile, I kept doing my playing career in the lower leagues, and then at some point when I was 34, I left. So I ended I quit playing, and I start to consider the chance to keep doing something in football. And the only thing I was thinking about was coaching. When I was 34, yes, it was 2004. No, I don't remember exactly. No, yes, it was 2004. So I was more than 34. No, sorry, I was 38. Sorry, my math is not my business. Anyway, I was 38 and I start to think about coaching. I started with my uh, last club where I was playing, and they offered me to coach an under 16 team, which was full of talent. And to be honest with you, this is something I always try to make people understand, that although that was the chance that gave me the start in my coaching career, I don't think is a good choice from a club's point of view to give a group of talented players to someone who never had coaching experience. But this is probably something that people will never learn. People, I mean decision-making people, that probably they want to give the chance to people to play all the players, former players, just because of their playing experience, which is a part of the experience, but is not everything. And in my case, I think I was lucky enough, and probably my players were lucky enough, that I was aware that just having been a good player didn't mean that I was a good coach. So I started to study a lot. I started to, probably helped by the fact that I was a bookseller at the time, I started to read books. I started to read books not about, systems or stuff. I started to read about, development of players, psychology, physiology. I started to understand which was good or not good for the development players, because as you know, because you do this job, you know that development is something, and playing and coaching older players is different. But I'm not saying something new, but at the time I was very aware of this lacking of experience and knowledge. And so I've always been interested in the dynamics of learning, and I'm still interested in, and I think that there is always something new to learn about on this topic. But that said, after a few years with this in the youth academies in the lower leagues in Italy, I started to work for Inter Milan. I had the chance to join Inter Milan in a project called Inter Campus Abroad. So basically, is a project that Inter Milan leads since I think now 20 years probably. They have a connection with different clubs in the world, several clubs, but probably not in the most important countries football wise. I mean, so I remember I went 3 times in China, in Cambodia, Colombia, Cuba, and all the Eastern Europe, just to bring let's say the Inter Academy methodology to the coaches of these academies. And that was a great experience that lasted 5 years, which gave me the chance to, first of all, to improve my English, which was pretty basic at the time. Not that now is good, but at least I think that you can understand what I'm saying.
Your English is better than my Italian, so don't downplay it. But I just on that, what were the differences from the academy you'd been at before in terms of methodology or ways of working and stuff to Inter Milan? Was there a big difference between the two, or were they relatively aligned in terms of what they were trying to do with the players?
There was a big difference. There was a big difference. Of course, the first big difference is the methodology. I mean, in all these local teams, it's like everyone do something random. in my opinion. And I was included me, I mean. So, because when you don't have any knowledge, any experience, you try to do something that probably is a sort of mix between what you think is good and what the previous coaches you had, they ask you to do. You take something, you know, bits of something that you remember from your past as a player, but probably it's like you put together something that has no really consistency. There is no real line, a straight line on in what you want to do. And then when I remember when I started to go to Milan first, because before to start this project, I was there for six months, twice a week, in a sort of coaching course, internal coaching course of the club. And then there you understand exactly what does it mean, what it means to have a guideline, to have a direction, to know what to do and how to approach with the different age levels. And so I remember there were top professionals in the youth academy, and then I learned a lot from them. And that was together with my studies, they helped me to have clear in my mind what I wanted to do. And I remember in one of my journeys to China, I remember one day where I started to understand exactly what direction I wanted to take. And I can tell you what happened, because it's interesting.
Yeah, do it.
I remember, you know, that before that, when I prepared my coaching, my sessions, as I said, I never had a clear idea what I wanted to do. You know, it was like a mix of different parts of something that wasn't, they weren't very connected each other. When I remember it was the second time I went to China, and we usually work in a big town called Qingdao, where there was a big academy. You know, with everything was very clear, everything was well organized, the structures, everything. But there was the idea to start with a new project. It was more a social, like more social project than a football project, like an experiment, a test. There was a small village in the countryside of China. It was about 200 miles from the big city, and the idea was to go there and try to understand how to introduce to football children that never had any knowledge about football. Not, I mean, literally. So these young kids they have never seen a football match. They have never have a ball. I remember this small village was even, you know, there were no electricity in the houses. It was a typical countryside in the middle of nowhere. All farmers, you know, and there were, I remember, probably 30 kids, 30 male and female, between 12 and 14 years old, and they never had any experience of what it means to play football. So I remember during then the following 6 months, these two coaches, Chinese coaches, went twice a week. They traveled twice a week to this village, and they started this project. So how to introduce to football, how to learn football, to teach football to children that they never had even watch a game. After 6 months, I came back to China, and then of course I was taken there to see how this project was going. And that was my eye opener, because I remember I sat on this small bench. There was like a row, like dirt, big space, and these two coaches started to show me what they have done until that moment. And they started with these kids, these children, one ball each, and these children started to dribble the ball around, like dribbling, controlling the ball. And then after 10 minutes of this stuff, they stood in couples, and they started to pass the ball each other, probably 10 meters away, one from the other. And then they started to control the ball in different ways. So after 30 minutes, I was, I had enough of this, because I could see that these kids, they were, they were doing things quite well, but then at some point I called the translator, and I said, please go to the coaches and tell them if they can play a game now. I want to see this player playing. I remember she went there. They exchanged a couple of words, and then she came back and she told me they can't play the game. They can't play a scrimmage. He said, why they can't? Because they don't know what is the game. So then, that was an eye-opener. So I asked the coaches what they did until that point. And the answer was that they thought that they should introduce these kids to the basic elements of football, starting from, for example, the dribbling, passing the ball each other. And then they were convinced that at the end of this process, they could put together these technical elements, and then at the end, they could play a game. So basically, these kids, they had, for them, the only knowledge of football was just passing the ball each other, driving the ball, but they never had the sense of the game, so they didn't know what the game is.
Almost the complete opposite to like the favelas, isn't it, in Brazil? Whereas in Brazil, they'll play games and they'll just figure out a way to dribble, to shoot, to pass, to cross.
Exactly.
Whereas here, it's so structured that they don't actually know how they're meant to implement it.
Yeah, that was the problem. So they started from the elements, and then when I asked them to, the day after, these kids came back to this field or whatever it was, and then I tried to I split them in two teams, and I had to explain what was football. So the game is, you with your shirt have to score in there. They couldn't move, because they never, they didn't have the sense of what they have to do. And that gave me the first real direction. So we have to start from the whole. So we have to start from the big picture, which is the game. And then to maybe, of course, we have to break down something, but as long as until the players, the young players don't get the real sense of the game, there is no point to teach them how to control a ball or how to pass the ball, because then I think within the game, everyone can learn his own style, his own way to interpret the game. That was I remember was one of the most important moment of my career.
And in terms of culture, how much experience how challenging has it been for you of embedding yourself into different cultures and the way that they play football? Because you think of in Europe of, you know, the Dutch flair because of Cruyff, or English just going around and running around like headless chickens, the Italians defending. China, from what it sounds like, didn't necessarily have a culture of football because they'd never seen it. They didn't know what the game was. So how along your experiences has different cultures challenged the way that you see the game?
Okay, I think that, of course, having to cope with different environments gave me, I remember that this gave me the ability to adapt to the environment that I had to work in, not only about the culture but about the structures. I remember, you know, I could go in Poland where there were just, you know, proper football field with everything in place. Everything was well organized. And then I went to Cameroon in Africa, where there were 100 kids screaming and they just want to play. And then we were in two, and we have to go with 100 kids, and I couldn't leave someone out. So you learn how to cope with different situations, and maybe in a split of a second you have to change something. And I remember that was the biggest step forward that this experience gave me. Different culture, of course, I would say that everywhere I went, football was always the same from the children point of view, from the kids' point of view. I went to Iran, and then I went to Slovenia, I went to Colombia. From a child point of view, football is always the same, and this is something that we sometimes forget. Is what is the way we approach as a coach is that change, and in my opinion, because we forget sometimes that the game is the real teacher. So I think that wherever I went, of course, I'm talking about young players, about youth development. If you start from the game, from playing the game, is always the right way. I never seen a kid that didn't enjoy playing football, and this is at the base of my coaching style, especially with the young players. Even after, when I start to work for top clubs like AS Roma, for example, where I worked for 3 years. But even with bit older players, if you keep your sessions very close to the game, so everything has to be game related, I think that is not only more enjoying for the players, but they actually learn more. Because if you want to keep everything under control, in my opinion, you will lose something, and the players will lose something. So if you let them have the freedom to express themselves, you will always have good positive surprises. This is my experience. So of course, when I worked for first teams, because of course, as you probably know, so my career has been divided in not only with the young players, but also first team, especially in England, and I had 4 different experiences in terms of countries: Italy, England, Portugal, and Finland at first team level. And of course, at first team level, I can say that there's differences. You know, there are many differences, because For example, when I was in Portugal, the players were their approach was different from to the coaching sessions. I mean, to the training sessions. In Portugal, the players were very different from the English ones. So I remember in Portugal, they like the tactical work, to have like sessions where you can stop them and teach them something. They can discuss. They ask a lot. They want to know a lot about, a tactical idea or something. Where, for example, in England, I remember we started. You switch on the timer, boom, and they start. They go 200 miles an hour for the whole session, and then sometimes when you want to stop them and show something, you can see that there is no this the same desire, they just want to go and push and press. But that was in 2011 and 12. So probably I think that now something has changed also in England, because with the new coaches, with the new methodologies, new way of training, I think that probably now is a bit different from my time.
And how hard is that for a coach to adapt to both of those? Because you've got one, that your interventions when you're stepping in to keep them engaged needs to be quick and fast, compared to Portugal, where you might be able to explain for longer periods of time while keeping their attention. So how hard is that for you as a coach to change how you're coaching principles for the team over those environments?
Yeah, I think it's just about the matter of, first of all, about the matter of way of communicating. Whereas, for example, in Portugal, as I said, you can involve the players more about the idea, about the movement, about whatever you think, and you are helped also by it looks strange, but of course you are helped by the weather, because I remember I was in Portugal in Algarve, and then when you have the privilege of training under the sun, then you can stop and you can talk, and maybe they can breathe a bit. In England, when it's raining and maybe it's cold, you cannot do the same. I remember in England, especially at Swindon, we used to use a lot of video, because then, of course, you can benefit from a better, let's say, a better environment in terms of, so you don't have to stay on the field and then maybe the players get colder because you want, and then using the videos, we could overcome this problem. Finland, for example, when there was really cold, we used to work, of course, in indoor places, so that was good. But then the mentality is a bit different. If you think Portugal, they are all like, they grown up with this generation of coaches, like Jose Mourinho was the first, and then all these young coaches in Portugal are like they are small Mourinhos, and then also the players grown up with this idea that tactical and reflecting and thinking and talking is a part of their development, and their knowledge as a players is very common in Portugal. I remember, like in Italy, that the players, I don't want to say they know exactly what the coach knows, but they are very informed. They want to know what the coach asked them to do. I didn't find this in England, to be honest. I think it's a part of the culture and the way of every single country develop its own idea.
Do you think that helps them solve problems on the pitch better? In terms of in-game, where you've got challenges the opponents are giving you, they're able to come up with solutions or problems, solution to the problems better.
Yes, exactly. I think so. I mean, I don't want to say that, so I'm not patronizing my country, but it's not surprised that many coaches at top level are Italians. No, I'm thinking about Ancelotti, I think about De Zerbi now.
Conte, even though I'm a Tottenham fan,
Conte, even if I'm not a fan of Conte in terms of his playing style, but still, you know, because as a players, when they were players, probably they were very, you know, interested in what the coach and the different coaches asked them to do. It wasn't enough for them to execute what the coach asked them to do. They always have the desire to go deeper, you know. I did the same when I was a player, even at the lower leagues. But I remember in my last few years as a player, I wasn't happy with some coaches, and then I realized then when I was a coach why I wasn't happy, because I didn't see any real connections between the training sessions and the game. So I think that from a player point of view, if they know, if they are interested in, and they think about the different dynamics of a game, as you said, they can probably solve, they find solutions for themselves rather than do you know blindlessly what the coach asks them to do. I think now everything is changing. You know, also I think more and more the players are trying to be more in the game. I mean, so to have more insight of the tactical part of the game, and which, in my opinion, is making football better compared to what it was, in my opinion, 30 years ago. So I think I like football much more now than it was what it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
No, it makes sense. Having been through the system, I agree. I think before it was a lot of we'll do exactly what the coach says, whereas now players will ask why. Why am I doing this? How does this benefit me? How does this benefit the team? What's the strategy? They want to understand the rationale for the instruction they're being given, which, as you mentioned, probably gives them a better bank of knowledge that they're able to use and decipher when in-game situations. Obviously, you mentioned around that transition from Inter Milan going into Swindon. How did that come about? How did that transition from, you know, academy work, if you like, into a first team environment? Yeah, how did that come around?
It happened in 2008. I went to Coverciano in Italy, which is the main headquarters of the Italian Coaches Association, and I did my coaching course. And in this course, there was also Paolo Di Canio, together with other former Italian, very very important former players. I remember there were Paolo Di Canio, Angelo Di Livio, Di Biagio, Ganz, Pagliuca, Di Francesco, many former players. And then of course I get in touch with Paolo, and at the end of this course, I remember he told me that if he would have ever had a chance to start coaching, probably he would have asked me to join him. And after 3 years, in 2011, Paolo had the chance to come to UK as a head coach of Swindon Town Football Club in League Two, and as promised, he offered me the job as assistant, which was for me it was a big step forward, because of course I was working at the time for Inter Milan, but in this project it wasn't a proper coaching job. I mean, I didn't have my team. It was just about going abroad and do what I mentioned before. When I had this chance, I didn't think twice, and it was my chance to live also my dream, because for every single player or coach in Italy, or I'm sure everywhere else, to think to go to work in England is a dream, I think. And then we moved to England, and we moved to this beautiful club, which gave us a lot of love and satisfaction. And I think we did it in return, because straight away we won the League Two at the first attempt. We reached the JPT final at Wembley. So think about, I was 1 year before I was in Italy, and then all of a sudden, after 1 year, I found myself on the bench of one of the most iconic stadium in the world, Wembley, which was for me more than was what I dreamt until that moment. It was a big step forward, but I was prepared, because I remember that I always done my job professionally. I always tried to keep myself up to date with all the methodology, and also I started to work a lot in Italy with video. I was a sort also video analyst because at the time there wasn't a video analyst, a match analyst. So I remember with Paolo at Swindon, I was also assistant manager, but I also studying the opposition, doing clips. So something that, and in the modern times, is something that is made by the match analysts. But at the time, it was me. We won this first season straight away. We got promoted to League One, and we were doing great again. But I remember it was probably a couple of months to go. We were top of the league, and then there's been a takeover of the club. So new owners came in, and there was straight away like a conflict between the new owners and Paolo. And Paolo decided to resign, and of course myself and the rest of the staff, we followed him, and then a couple of months later we moved to Sunderland in Premier League, which was again one of the most important moment of my career. Everything happened so fast that probably I would say not just me, but Paolo as well, we weren't ready for that level yet.
Why do you say that?
Because League Two and League One are, in my opinion, were important steps for our career. But Paolo was at his first managerial job. We were doing well, but probably we moved too early there, because I remember probably the main mistake was to treat the players in Premier League like we did in League Two or League One, which wasn't probably the best choice. because you think something that have worked can work again, but it doesn't work like this. So you should be able to adapt your style and your main management to the new environment, which was very different. Like it or not, Sunderland was the same as Swindon, you know. And probably I'm sure that even Paolo, if he could come back at those time, he would do something different. That said, I'm sure that we weren't probably ready, but the team wasn't good enough for the level, because Sunderland at the time wasn't, in my opinion, a team that could compete against top clubs like Premier League have, you know. But sometimes, you know, you have the right chance at the wrong moment. I'm sure that probably if this happened maybe a couple of years after, probably we could do much better than what we did.
So obviously you stayed up that initial season, correct?
Yeah.
And then did you carry on into the following season to start the following season? So I guess during that period, how hard did you guys find it in terms of trying to attract players that you thought were capable of competing at that level? Because I'd imagine you'd have half a squad of people like Wes Brown, John O'Shea, people like that, you know, former Man United players that probably are capable of playing at that level, but probably with some other players that were going to struggle or make it more challenging. How hard did you guys find it in trying to identify those players and then bring them to the club?
Yeah, I would like to start from the first season. So when we took over in April, when Martin O'Neill was released, and we took over. That was easier, because when you go into a team, so when you take the reins of a team that is in free fall, the players have no excuses. They could just do one thing. So trust us, trust Paolo, and we were their last choice, the last resource to try and not fall down, you know, and don't go in the championship. So everything we asked them to do, I remember they were like eager to do it, and that worked, because I remember especially in the first game we went to London to play Chelsea away, and even if we lost, I remember that the team did well, and probably this gave a bit of enthusiasm to the players. And then the second game after that was this epic win in the derby in Newcastle, again, St. James's, 3-0 against Newcastle there. That was the turning point, because then all the enthusiasm, all the environment where we were all leading and working for the same target, and we got the target, and we were safe at the end of the season. Of course, in the summer, I remember that Paolo wanted to change a lot in the roster, in the players. For example, you mentioned Wes Brown. Wes Brown was, of course, a big name, but we never had the chance to play him because he was always injured. There were players like Lee Cattermole injured, Stephen Fletcher injured. Of course, John O'Shea was a top player, top professional, but still it was a bit, you know, in his last years of his career. There was a bunch of young players that, in my opinion, didn't have the potential. Like I remember McLean, the Irish guy, or even Connor Wickham, players that never, succeed at the top level. So when Paolo tried to bring in new players, I remember that based on his previous experience, our previous experience in Swindon, Paolo asked the club to bring in English players, British players, because he was aware that British players could do better in a club like Sunderland, if you know what I mean. So we couldn't play the football, fantastic football. We should work for and fight for our lives. So, but the problem was that the director at the time was an Italian, and this Italian wanted to bring in players from abroad. I remember he brought in a Swiss player, Greek players, players that couldn't. So we found out straight away they weren't for that level, and for this reason it was like Paulo was unhappy, and the players understood this. I had the feeling that there was no Paulo wasn't really happy with them, and then the players sensed this, and then it didn't work. The second season didn't work, and the more the games went by, I remember that at some point we lost the dressing room. Simple as that, and the club decided to change.
And so, can you feel that as coaches? Because we talk about it a lot, don't you? You hear the manager's lost the dressing room, or that they've turned against the coach. Can you feel that as coaches that people are beginning to switch off from the messages you're trying to deliver?
Yes, I think every coach can sense this. So at all levels, you have the feeling that the players don't. I don't want to say they play against you, because I don't think there are players that play against their shirt or the club to damage the coach. But you can sense that there is no connection, there is no empathy, there is no the desire to work together for the same target, which, for example, was the previous season. Sometimes, it's the coach's fault. Sometimes it's not the player's fault. It's in between. So it's something that you can share the blame, even if honestly, I think honestly that the coach has to take the blame, because the players follow. So I want to give you an example. As I told you, I've been at Brighton Football Club 1 month ago, and I spoke to a couple of players, Lallana and Dunk, because I used to know them from my time in England, and they told me after one day that Roberto De Zerbi came in, after one day they realized that it was like someone who they want to follow, because I think that the coach has the chance and the ability to drive the players in the direction that the coach wants. So if this direction is right, or the way you want to drive them is good, the players follow. There is no player that go against the coach if the coach use the right way, the right. So if the coach show that he trusts them, it's a mutual feeling. And when you don't have this feeling, there is something that is wrong. And unfortunately for us, I remember the second season at Sunderland was exactly, the feeling wasn't good, you know. And then at the end,
from reflecting, do you think there's any way that a coach can turn that around in terms of players and staff or whatnot are beginning to have that feeling of disconnect? Do you think there's anything coaches can do to turn that ship and actually get people back on board? Or do you think it is purely just down to results? If you start winning again, then people start getting on board again?
I don't think it's about winning. I think it's about, probably from the coaching point of view, to make a step back and talk honestly to the players and let's say admit that something went wrong. I can tell you this. When I was in Finland and I was head coach of Inter Turku in the top division in Finland, there was a moment, I remember, where probably because of the results or something, I didn't feel that there was something, that everything was right. And I started to be a bit harsh with my players. And there was a period of time where I could sense, not that I lost the dressing room. I never lost the dressing room, but I wasn't feeling, I didn't feel this sense of connection, real connection with the players, for many reasons. Probably because of the language. For maybe I remember I had a problem with a couple of players because my style sometimes was a bit different from the Finnish player expecting, and we reached the cup final, the Finnish cup final, and even at the time, I wasn't sure about as I said, I didn't feel this positive vibes, if you like. And I remember before the game, my pre-match talk in the hotel before the final was about asking my players, apologizing to my players about my behavior and admitting that I've been too tough with them, making them understand that I'm a human being and I can make mistakes. And this didn't mean that I was against them or I didn't like them. It was me, probably for many reasons. We didn't find the key to connect each other. So basically, my pre-match talk was an admission of human weakness. And I remember, and I have goosebumps, still goosebumps. After, I remember it lasted 10 minutes. At the end, they just applauded me. Like, they wanted to show me that they understood that I was naked, in front of them with my weaknesses, if you know what I mean. We won the game and we celebrate the cup. We won the cup final. I don't want to say that it was because of my pre-match talk, but for sure, I'm sure it helped, because in that moment, I created a sense of connection with them, and every single doubt, every single conflict, every single problem we had, I remember that after that pre-match talk was over. And for this reason, I think that when you feel this when you sense this problem with the dressing room, sometimes there is this idea that probably you want to be even on top, always even more. You want to raise the level of your toughness sometimes, because you want to show that you're the leader. But sometimes it doesn't work, because this leads only to further negative feelings. But this is part of the experience, I think, and everyone is different. So I remember that the English experience with Sunderland helped me to behave in a different way when it was my turn, if you know what I mean. So
yeah, no, 100%. And then second to last question. Obviously, you've had two stops in terms of under 17s roles or under 16s roles with Roma and Sampdoria. When you're at that top end and you're looking at obviously players that hopefully over the next 3 or 4 years are going to progress into that environment, how do you prepare them for what you've just spoken about there, which is at times there is a coach that's going to be tough with them on performance and needing results, but then at other times, obviously, they're going to need to maybe be a bit softer. How do you prepare the younger players, knowing that, ultimately the first team coach is a human being, they're a person, they might make mistakes, but they're looking for what's best for the team, and they obviously want to win games, and if you help them do that, they'll back you, if you like. How do you prepare them for that jump?
Okay, going from a first team environment to AS Roma, because I remember I left Finland after 2 years and a half as a head coach there with the first team, and I moved to AS Roma for to coach the under 17. I think first and foremost that the experience with the first team, with the adult players, gave me a different perception and perspective also to my coaching style with the young players. I didn't want, because when I was at first team level, I learned a lot about how to treat people, how to interact with adult players, and to understand that every single player is different. They have their own background, they have their own culture. You have to give the same rules but treat them differently. So if you know what I mean. So you can have the same rules, but then you have different human beings in front of you, and you have to try and connect with them according to their own character differences. Sometimes I think when you coach young players, you don't make the same assumption. You think they are young players, that's it, because they don't have an experience, but they're still human beings. So I remember that the first thing I tried to do with my 16 years old players at AS Roma, I remember I decided to treat them like adult players, but not in terms of expectations with the results or stuff. But I remember that I tried to talk with every one of them in the way that I think it was good for every one of them, for each of them. I didn't treat them all the same, in the same way. I learned that even with the young players, you have to remember that if there's a human being in front of you, and then I think this gave me the opportunity to create a bond, a strong bond with all of them. And when you create this kind of bond, you can they can accept everything. I mean, the honesty, and they knew that I was ready to praise them, but also to not to blame them, but to tell them when they weren't doing well, and they accept this. And also, if you treat them as adults, then it's easy then to make them understand that this is the treatment that they will receive when they will be adults. So there's no difference. So, and then the responsibility is always to share, you share this responsibility with them. So it's not only about the coach, all about the coach. It's also all about them, and this, what I told you before. I always try to make them understand that as a coach, I cannot take them to success. So I can create the conditions, but then it's up to them to go there and to take the chance and to go where they want to go, especially at AS Roma, because now, for example, many players that I had now they're playing in Serie A. So lots of them at AS Roma, they are ready for that, because they know and they feel the weight of the shirt they wear, you know, because to play for AS Roma, for example, in Rome, in a city like Rome with 5 million people, these players feel their responsibility. So in a way, it's a bit easier, you know, because they know that if they fail, there are other 100 players that are ready to take their place. So they are very focused on what they want to do. In other clubs like Sampdoria, for example, it's not the same, because they don't feel the same responsibility, the same pressure, if you like. So they think that everything is gonna be easy. But once again, I think that when you treat people and they understand that you care about them, even either if they are old or young, they will give you something. You can create something. What I like to do, this is something I kept doing for in all my years at AS Roma, and then I kept doing this at Spal. Just because before being a coach, I was a bookseller, and I like to read. I used to give a book to my players when for their birthday, and when it was one player's birthday, I gave them a book, and I remember that I always try to give a book that was was right for this boy, in this case, this kid. And I think that this was a key, because think about a young player that received a book from his coach. And when I remember when I was giving the book, I always explaining, I'm giving you this book for this reason, because I think this is for you, because you are in this way. I think this book can tell you something. And if you put for a moment in the player's mind that think, my coach spent maybe half an hour of his time, and he went in a bookshop for me, and he bought a book for me, not just a random book, you know, that tells a lot to the player, you know, in terms of connection, in terms of how my coach care about me, how he likes me. I wasn't, to be honest, I wasn't interested in knowing if the player actually read the book, you know, because I'm not their teacher, but I wanted to create this connection. And also for me, to give the book is important, because for me books are important in my life, and they knew that. So I think again that if you can create this kind of bond with your players, old or young players, then they will do something extra. They will do more.
No, and I think it makes complete sense what you're saying about that, treating them like adults to a degree in the conversation you're having. It is preparing them for what's next, which is more adult type conversations, where if you keep treating them like children and whatnot, then it's going to be more challenging for that. So there's one last question for me. I'm just conscious of time, which is, if I were to ask any of the other coaches you work with, or any of the players you've coached, to describe you in 3 words, how do you hope they would describe you?
Good question. Okay, I would say knowledgeable, for sure, because I'm not afraid to say that I know football, because I've been studying football for my whole life, and I can keep a conversation about football for hours with the players, so I can say I'm knowledgeable. Open for sure, and human. I 3 words, because I think that knowledgeable, I told you why. Open, because I think that I'm very curious. I'm open to listen. I'm open to understand. I'm open to new ideas, open to... I remember that during a training session with my under 17, the second year at AS Roma, we were working on a build-up from the back, from the goalkeeper. And it was the first year where there was the new rule that the players can go in the box, you remember, to get the ball. And at some point, one of my players, one of my midfielder, number 6, decided to walk in the box and take the ball from the goalkeeper, which is something that now I see that many teams do. And then I said, "So what are you doing?" He said, "Gaffer, I think that if I go there, nobody can follow me, so I can take the ball easily, and then I can do." And rather than tell him, "No, you do what I'm asking you to do," I was open to this new solution that he decided to take. And that from that moment on, I decided to keep going with this, because for this reason I say I'm open, because I'm very open to new ideas, new solutions, and open to understand, open to listen, and human, because all my players know that I'm human with all my strength and my weaknesses. I'm not afraid to show my weaknesses. Sometimes if the people in front of you is not intelligent, they can judge maybe this as a weakness, or no, I think weakness is in terms of flows. I don't know if this is the English word. So like everyone else have, and it's not just because you are the coach, you know everything, or you are powerful. So that is, in my opinion, these 3 words define me.
Perfect. Listen, Fabrizio, an amazing conversation about your journey. So I'm sure on behalf of everyone listening, really appreciate your time, and catch up with you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast, and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.